Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. Happy Juneteenth. Today we are going to be talking about the state of Texas here, in which a battleground state that has been in heavy contention and consideration for both political parties over the past decade as it becomes increasingly more close on the presidential level, on the Senate level, on the House level, and pretty much in every metric compared to its previously very much established strong Republican identity. Texas has been a state that the Republican Party has been winning election after election, and largely with significant margins. We've seen it in years where you see someone like President George W. Bush win across the state by 24 points. Governor Mitt Romney win by 17 points across the state. Texas arguably has been one of the more conservative-leaning states, and at one point in time, leaned into the realm of being one of the most conservative states across the country. Now, Texas has been often referred to as the Republican Party's California for its large number of electoral votes. In 2020, it had 38 electoral votes to California's 55, and they had voted in very much opposite directions. And consistently, Republicans have hoped that Texas would be this state that holds strong for them in terms of population, in terms of solid conservative nature, and yet over the past decade has become increasingly more Democratic in a way that honestly should terrify the Republican Party. Because the 2020 presidential election, I think, was one of a two-part wake-up call for Republicans in the state of Texas. In 2018 would arguably be the first one where Senator Ted Cruz defeated Beto O'Rourke, then a representative, now a more nationally known figure, but then a representative by a margin of just roughly 2.6%. This was the closest U.S. Senate race in Texas since 1978, and a very strong performance for Democrats in a way that we just simply had not seen in any election prior. Then, 2 years later, on the presidential level, Donald Trump defeats Joe Biden in Texas by 5.6%. Now, the reason why that's significant, Texas is typically a very strong Republican state. In 2016, Donald Trump won the state by 9. In 2012, Mitt Romney won the state by 17. And so for a reversion of support in favor of the Democratic Party 4 years after, another 4 years after, it draws into question, what will this look like not only in 2024, but also in the future for Republican politics? I want to make a point here to talk to you about exactly why Texas holds such importance when it comes down to the presidential level, because it really could make or break an entire election. What we can do here is take all of the states that Donald Trump won in the 2016 election, taking out Texas, and brings him to a point where he comes very close to the presidential margin here. Comes very close to being at 270 electoral votes. We throw in North Carolina, we throw in Florida here, we throw in Louisiana, we throw in Alaska. But it just simply gets him short of 270. Joe Biden could theoretically win the presidential election by winning all of the states that went blue in 2016. All of the Hillary Clinton states, which really isn't saying that much given that she had lost the majority of battleground states. And you flip the state of Texas to the Democratic Party side, and Joe Biden wins the election. It actually gets a bit worse for Republicans when you look at the 2016 presidential election, when you see that in this map, Donald Trump won 306 electoral votes to Hillary Clinton's 232. If you gave her 38 more electoral votes, she would have won the White House. Where do we find 38 electoral votes? In the state of Texas. Now, Donald Trump won the state by 9 points in 2016, and it really wasn't in consideration. It was never going to go to Hillary Clinton or the Democratic Party in 2016. But in a way, we did look at it and say, Texas was showing itself to be more competitive than 2012. Why did that matter? Well, when you take a look at the comparison of 2012 and 2016, you'll find that Texas was one of the very few states that shifted to the left. In fact, out of all of the states that shifted to the left, Texas ended up being even more significant than Arizona, even more significant than Georgia, and that is so substantial because it means here that Texas, despite the entire country shifting to the right, which means that if Hillary Clinton had won this election, Texas probably would have been bluer, arguably, similar to what we saw with Biden in 2020. But it was the fact that Texas shifted towards the left quite significantly in a way that was entirely unexpected. It showed that there was an opening opportunity for Democrats in Texas. And with that would come the presidency election after election. It makes it nearly impossible for Republicans to win any presidential election from here on out if Texas was to be a blue state. Because similar to California, Texas is a large population dump. It is 40 electoral votes and California is 54. You'd be talking about a significant chunk of the Democratic electorate just existing in those two states. And think about it from this perspective. While this map may make it seem narrow, If Texas was to go blue, let's say Democrats win maybe just one more swing state, because they are going to probably win one of the states that are currently characterized as red right now, maybe two, maybe three, four, or five if they win Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania or Georgia or Arizona. Because if you throw in all the states that Biden won in 2020, you see that Joe Biden would expand to 343 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 195. And so it would be a complete trouncing of a Trump bid. But at the same time, it would require Texas to go blue. My point here, Texas being blue would mean that many other swing states would likely be following suit. But even if they don't, it doesn't matter. Democrats still win the election. That is the fundamental problem if Texas goes to the Democratic Party side, which is why Republicans are investing in their ground game and their gerrymandering game and everything they can to decrease Democratic turnout, to decrease the amount of enthusiasm on the Democratic Party side, to try to change some of the trend lines we are seeing here away from the Republican Party. Because if they can do that, if Republicans can do that, they stall the inevitable about Texas. That it's rapidly changing demographics, that it's increased regions in the suburbs that are becoming more and more Democratic, that it's influx from other Democratic states into the state, a mass exodus of California residents into Texas. Not all of those are Republicans. A lot of people are moving to Texas. There's a tech boom there. Those people tend to lean left. You're looking at different booms across Texas that are boosting its population and thus boosting the Democratic Party's chance of victory in this state. Now, it doesn't just extend to the presidential level. I think this might be one example of how, despite every other swing state practically going to the right, that you would find that Texas would be the defining state that hands Joe Biden a victory. I mean, could you imagine a map like this one where Democrats just, throw in all of their funds into Texas in the hopes that they win this state, and they do end up winning the state, and Biden loses Wisconsin, loses Michigan, loses Pennsylvania, loses Georgia, loses Arizona. 5 states flip. 6 different regions of the country, if you include Nebraska second, flip to Donald Trump's column from Joe Biden in 2020. And if that was to happen, it would seem as if this was going to be a wave. But if just Texas went to the Democrats, Joe Biden wins re-election. So keeping that in mind, where else does this matter? Well, when I take a look at the Senate elections, I am constantly thinking about the fact, that Democrats are always looking for ways to build up their bench. And what that means here is that they're looking to see, okay, where can we have a reliable Democratic vote amount, right? Where can we have a reliable amount of support across the country? Where can we have a reliable amount of support in these states? Because they're up every 2 years. Every 2 years in the House, every 6 in the Senate, but, off cycles, your Senate Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. And so when you look at where Democrats are really trying to focus on, Wisconsin does not have 2 Democrats here, they're looking for areas where if they lose a state like West Virginia, which they currently have right now, or if they lose a state like Ohio, which they currently have right now, or lose a state like Montana, where can they make it up? And I think this is where Texas would come into play as a very obvious answer for the Democratic Party. What I'm going to do here is characterize practically all of the states that are currently, Republican and Democrat. I think this would help us visualize it just a little bit easier for, our understanding, where Republicans are, where Democrats are, and what it would mean for our overall electoral process. Texas right now is a Republican state, 2 Republican senators in the state. Here's what the map would look like if Texas went blue. Assuming that it follows a very similar trend line to Georgia, which I will actually bring up in just a moment about the feasibility of everything like this, Texas being that state, it would bring Democrats based on right now to 53. Well, what we know after the 2024 election, and it will take a while for Texas to become a Democratic state if this was to be a reality, we will see probably at that point that West Virginia will go red, Ohio will go red, Montana will go red, but Maine will stay Democrat and move over if Susan Collins retires, or maybe she might even lose. She won by 8 points and 34 in the election prior. And so reduction in support there is something that you can't ignore. Point being, even if Democrats lose their support in West Virginia, lose their support in Montana, lose their support in Ohio, which could very well make sense. West Virginia is a foregone conclusion, but Ohio and Montana could make sense depending on what Donald Trump's margins are in this election. That would bring Republicans to roughly 49. And assuming that everything else stays the same, and then Maine moves over to the Democratic Party, simple things that we've seen, just the lack of split ticket voting. I don't expect Democrats to ever lose Maine on the presidential level. And so right now I would say Maine would make sense to being reverted back to the Democratic Party. My point and my takeaway from this is that as things move on, and as we see states become more solidified in their answers, yes, I'm re-electing John Fetterman in the state of Pennsylvania. Yes, I'm re-electing Jackie Rosen in the state of Nevada. Assuming these things stay constant, and maybe we will see some fluctuation, right? Maybe North Carolina will have a Democratic senator, and Wisconsin will have 2 Republican senators, or something of that variation. Regardless, Texas being a state similar to that of Georgia or Arizona, a very long-standing Republican state that has recently turned towards the Democratic Party, what it could mean is preventing Republicans from winning majorities in the Senate time and time again. Because we are seeing Democrats sort of consolidate with strong candidates in these blue states, you often find in 2018, all of the incumbents ran. In 2020, all of the incumbents ran. In 2022, all of the incumbents ran. In 2024, almost all of the incumbents are running. Why? Because Democrats field the right people and have candidates who aren't just electable for one time. Because I can guarantee you, if Dr. Oz was to win that Senate race in Pennsylvania, he would be doomed in the next election and would have only won because of different things that people had considered in an individual instance in that Senate race, but not for future races. On the other side, somebody like John Fetterman or Bob Casey or somebody that you see in other states too. Good examples would be Tammy Baldwin in the state of Wisconsin. These are people that are reliable Democrats who can reliably win elections. And so Democrats, I'm sure, similar to what they did with Raphael Warnock, who's a tried and tested incumbent now, just won his full term. John Ossoff in the state of Georgia, who went from losing a congressional bid to becoming a United States Senator. That's what Democrats would do in Texas. And if they were able to do so, it would build this impenetrable wall across the Sun Belt. Mark Kelly is popular, right? He's popular. Whoever is elected there, Ruben Gallego, will likely be popular in Arizona as well. Jackie Rosen is popular. Catherine Cortez Masto is popular. Democrats have good incumbents, and that allows them to win election after election with very, very few mess-ups. In 2022, not a single Democratic incumbent was unseated when it came down to our elections in the Senate. I mean, that is substantial. Not a single Democratic seat flipped to the Republicans in 2022. And so keeping that in mind, Democrats had a very stellar performance in the midterm elections. Why? Because they were able to run the overwhelming majority of their incumbents with very few exceptions. Very, very limited exceptions. And so I think when you're looking at 2024, and you're looking at 2026, and you're looking at 2028, Texas could be a defining state. And in future elections, those two Senate races build up what is to be this very strong Democratic wall as of right now. Which means if Democrats even were just to have a slight overperformance, winning one seat in North Carolina, or for the Republican Party's sake, God forbid for them, they hold on to a state like Montana and Ohio, that would put Democrats in a very strong position. My point here is that Texas builds up a firewall in the same way it does in the Electoral College. It matters on every single level, which is why Republicans should really worry about any direction towards the left that it goes, because it isn't too far-fetched from what might actually be our reality. In 2016, Georgia was a state that Donald Trump won by 5.1%. And while it did narrow down from 2012, it wasn't as substantial of a swing as Texas, and Democrats weren't really expecting to win it by the next election. But a lot can happen in 4 years. In 2018, the governor race came around, and Democrats proved that they could come very, very close to winning in Georgia. Stacey Abrams lost by 1.4%. Then she decided to dedicate all of her time after losing to electing a Democrat in the presidential level in Georgia in 2020. And it happened. Georgia became a state that voted for Joe Biden, a 5-point swing, nearly 6-point swing from 2016 in 4 years' time. Why do I bring up that 5.1% number? Well, remember what Texas was in 2020? It was 5.6%. And while I'm not going to come here and claim that Texas is going to be a Biden state in 2024, I don't think that's at all within the realm of possibility right now. However, feasibility in the future, in 2028, in 2032, the numbers are conducive for a Democratic flip. The circumstances are conducive for a Democratic flip because we've seen it happen in states equally as partisan, equally as conservative. And while it will take a lot more money than Georgia, arguably, hundreds of millions of more dollars on the Democratic Party side, and Republicans sort of fell asleep at the wheel in Georgia in a way that they are not in Texas after that performance by Beto O'Rourke in 2018. They got their crap together, and they're doing it again for the 2024 Senate races. Ted Cruz treated 2018 like a cakewalk, almost lost. This time around, he's actually campaigning. My takeaway, too, is that Texas, though, is absolutely within the realm of possibility for future elections. It absolutely is within the realm of possibility that this now becomes a future Democratic stronghold, and maybe by 5 or 6 or 7 points. But it helps Democrats in a way that cannot be at all really understood until it actually happens. It is an unfathomable idea for the Democratic Party because Texas has been such a long-standing Republican state that the moment that it flips blue, Democrats will do everything in their power to maintain it because they know its political power. They know what it can do for them on the presidential level, on the Senate level, arguably even on the House level. There are so many benefits of having Texas being controlled by Democrats for them, for the Democratic Party, and they know that. And in the event that it happens, I think we will find that American politics will fundamentally change. Republicans will have to start changing their policy platforms. They'll have to stop trying to just pivot to those 7 battleground states that we talk about time and time again: Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, because a lot of them will be rendered useless in the event Democrats win Texas. And that will be something Republicans will have to combat in the future. But we will see how it works, how Democrats and Republicans fight in this state, because it really could determine the future not only just of Texas and surrounding politics, but also the nation, from one state with 40 electoral votes that can rule them all in the way that they vote if they end up voting blue. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist of my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.